The galactic survey vessel Whisper of Certainty had traveled farther than most beings could imagine. For 300 years, it had drifted between stars, worlds, and species with the patience of deep time. The ship's crew changed every few decades, but the mission never did. Find life, study it, report back. Senior Surveyor had served on the Whisper for 40 years. She was a species that had evolved on a world of endless grasslands and swift predators. Her people were tall and thin, built for running. Their eyes sat on the sides of their heads, giving them vision in nearly every direction at once. Their antennae could detect vibrations in the air from 100 meters away. Everything about them screamed one thing: prey. They had survived by being alert, by being fast, by never stopping to fight when they could flee instead. I had seen many strange things in her decades of service. She had watched silicon-based life forms sing to each other across methane seas. She had documented a species that existed as clouds of electromagnetic energy. She had even found a world where the plants hunted the animals instead of the other way around. Nothing surprised her anymore. Or so she thought. The yellow star system appeared unremarkable on initial scans. One habitable world in the temperate zone, covered mostly in water, oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, carbon-based life, standard enough. The Whisper's sensors detected electromagnetic signals bleeding into space, the sure sign of a technological civilization. This was exciting but not unusual. The galaxy held many such species. I ordered the standard approach: stay hidden, observe, compile data, do not interfere. The Galactic Compact had strict rules about first contact. You had to understand a species before you spoke to them. Her team spent 3 months collecting information. They intercepted broadcasts, decoded languages, and built a picture of the dominant species. They called themselves humans. They had spread across most of their planet's land masses. They had built cities and machines and networks of instant communication. The more I learned, the more confused she became. Humans were soft. Their skin could be cut by sharp grass. They had no natural armor, no scales, no protective shell. Their claws were laughable, barely enough to scratch an itch. Their teeth were small and flat, useless for tearing meat from bone. They could not run particularly fast. They could not fly. They could not breathe underwater. They had no venom, no poison, no defensive spray. By every measure they used to assess species, humans should have been prey. They should have been something that hid in caves and hoped nothing found them. They should have been a footnote in some predator's diet. Instead, they ruled their world. I called a meeting of her senior staff. They gathered in the observation room, where a blue and green planet hung in the darkness outside the window. I do not understand this, I admitted. She projected images onto the display screen. They have no natural weapons. They are not fast. They are not strong compared to many of the predators that share their world. How did they become dominant? Her second-in-command, a young named, pulled up additional data. I have been studying their evolutionary history. It is disturbing. He showed them footage recovered from human broadcasts, a documentary the humans called it. The images showed a group of humans on a flat, dry plain. They were following an animal, a large four-legged creature with horns. The animal was running. Watch said, just watch. The humans did not run fast. The animal easily outpaced them, but the humans did not stop. They kept moving, walking, jogging, never sprinting. The animal would run far ahead, then stop to rest. The humans would catch up. The animal would run again. The humans would follow. This went on for hours. The footage was compressed but explained that the actual hunt had lasted most of a day. The animal grew tired. Its running became slower, more desperate. The humans never tired. They just kept coming. Finally, the animal collapsed. Its body had overheated. It could not run anymore. It could not even stand. The humans walked up to it calmly and killed it with simple tools. They call this persistence hunting, said. His antennae were flat against his head, a sign of deep unease. They do not chase prey the way a predator chases prey. They follow it. They track it. They walk it to death. The room was silent. I had evolved from creatures that ran from predators. Her entire species had been shaped by the need to escape things that chased them. They had developed their wide field of vision, their sensitive antennae, their incredible speed, all to avoid being caught. But the humans did not catch, they followed, and they never stopped. There is more, continued. He showed them other footage. Humans climbing mountains because they were there. Humans swimming across freezing oceans for sport. Humans running distances that would kill most species, then smiling at the end. A human tradition called a marathon, named after a soldier who had run 40 kilometers to deliver a message, then died. They celebrate this, said. They run these distances for fun. Thousands of them do this regularly. I felt something she had not felt in decades. Fear, true, deep fear. One of her junior researchers spoke up. But they are so fragile. Our data shows they can be killed easily. Their bones break. Their organs fail under stress. They die from falls that would merely bruise other species. Yes, agreed. They die easily, and then they get back up and try again. Look at this. He showed them medical data. Humans routinely survived injuries that should have killed them. They had a medical tradition of cutting open their own bodies to fix problems inside, then sewing themselves back together. They replaced failing organs with organs from other humans. They attached mechanical limbs when biological ones failed. When they cannot do something, said, they build a tool that lets them do it. When their bodies fail, they fix them. When they face obstacles, they do not go around. They go through. I studied the images of human faces. She noticed something that had been bothering her since they first started observing this species. Their eyes. Human eyes faced forward, set in the front of their skulls. Both eyes looked in the same direction. In the 17,000 worlds the Whisper had, forward-facing eyes meant one thing: predator. Hunters needed depth perception to track and catch prey. Prey needed wide vision to watch for threats from all directions. Humans were predators. Not just predators, apex predators, the top of their food chain, the thing that ate other things and was eaten by nothing. We need to make contact, I said. Her staff stared at her. Senior Surveyor said carefully, protocol suggests we observe for at least another year before. I understand the protocol, I wrote half of it. A turn to face her crew. But this species is different. They are already sending signals into space. They are looking for others like themselves. They will find us eventually, or someone else will find them. Better that the first contact is managed. She looked back at the blue planet. And better that we are their friends than their prey. The first contact happened 3 months later after careful preparation. I insisted on following every protocol, every safety measure. She chose neutral ground, a space station the humans had built in orbit around their world. She brought translators and diplomats and specialists in a dozen fields. The human delegation arrived in a small vessel. There were 5 of them. 3 males, 2 females, though I had learned that humans did not sort themselves so simply. They wore fabric coverings over their soft bodies. They moved slowly, carefully, aware that they were making history. I met them in the station's main chamber. She stood with her staff behind her, all of them trying not to tremble. The humans were shorter than, but broader, more solid. They moved with a confidence that spoke of a species that had never needed to run from anything. The lead human stepped forward. It was a female, older than the others, with gray in her dark hair. She smiled, showing her teeth. I forced herself not to flinch. Bared teeth meant aggression in most species, but the humans used it as a greeting, a sign of friendship. I had studied this. She understood it intellectually. But her instincts were millions of years old, and they screamed at her to run. Welcome, the human said. My name is, on behalf of Earth and all humanity, I greet you in peace. I found her voice. I am Senior Surveyor of the Galactic Survey Vessel Whisper of Certainty. On behalf of the Galactic Compact, I receive your greeting." Smile widened. "We've been hopping, we weren't alone out here. The universe seemed too big to be empty." "It is not empty," I said. "There are thousands of species across hundreds of worlds. You are simply the to be found." She watched face as she said this. The human did not look surprised. She did not look afraid. She looked excited, eager, happy. A thought about what she had learned. Humans were persistence predators. They did not sprint toward their goals. They walked toward them patiently, endlessly, never stopping until they arrived. And now they knew the galaxy was full of other species. Other goals, other destinations. I felt that fear again deep in her bones, but she also felt something else. Hope, perhaps, because these strange, soft, terrifying creatures were smiling at her with genuine warmth. They wanted to be friends. Maybe, she thought, the galaxy finally had protectors worth the name. Not species that hid from danger or fled from threats, but apex predators who had conquered their world and now looked to the stars with hungry eyes and open hands. The universe would never be the same. The news of first contact spread across the Galactic Compact like fire through dry grass. 17,000 worlds had produced thousands of intelligent species, but none quite like the newcomers from the yellow star system. Within months, every government, every research institution, every curious individual knew the name of the strange new species. Humans. The Galactic Compact was ancient. It had been founded 200,000 years ago, when the first species developed faster-than-light travel and discovered they were not alone. Since then, it had grown slowly, absorbing new civilizations as they reached the stars. The Compact was built on cooperation, on trade, on the shared understanding that the galaxy was dangerous enough without intelligent species fighting each other. But peace was not automatic. It required work. It required the peacekeeping force, a combined military drawn from hundreds of species. It required diplomacy and compromise and sometimes, when all else failed, strength. Humans joined the Compact 3 years after first contact. They were eager, enthusiastic, determined to prove themselves. They sent diplomats to the capital world. They opened trade routes. They shared their technology and asked to learn in return. Now an ambassador rather than a surveyor watched them with fascination. She had become something of an expert on humanity. She had written papers about them, given lectures, advised governments. Everyone wanted to understand these strange creatures who had come from nowhere and seemed afraid of nothing. The humans adapted to galactic society faster than any species in recorded history. This should not have surprised us. Adaptation was what humans did. They came from a world of extreme environments, from frozen poles to burning deserts, and they had conquered all of it. Space was just another environment to master. They were not the strongest species in the Compact. There were stronger, massive beings of stone and metal from a high-gravity world. They were not the fastest. They still held that honor. They were not the most intelligent or the most technologically advanced or the longest-lived. But they were something else, something harder to define. I discovered what it was during the incident. The Dominion was not part of the Galactic Compact. They refused to join, refused to cooperate, refused to accept any authority but their own. They were creatures, organized into vast hives ruled by queens who measured their worth in subjugated worlds. For thousands of years, they had expanded slowly, conquering species on the edges of compact space. The Compact had fought them before. Small conflicts, border skirmishes, diplomatic incidents, but they were patient. They could wait for generations, building their strength, watching for weakness. And 3 years after humanity joined the Compact, they saw what they believed was weakness. A human colony, new, small, isolated. Colony 7 had been established 2 years earlier on a world at the edge of human space. It held 40,000 colonists, mostly farmers and miners and the support workers who kept such communities running. They had a small defense force, a handful of ships, nothing that could stand against a proper military. They calculated carefully. They always calculated. Humans were new to the galaxy. Their fleet was small, their territory limited, their allies untested. A quick strike could capture the colony before help arrived. The humans would be forced to negotiate to pay tribute to acknowledge superiority. It was a reasonable calculation. It had worked against dozens of species before. It failed completely against humans. The siege began on a Tuesday, not that the colonists thought in such terms anymore. 30 warships appeared in orbit, blocking all escape. Ground forces landed within hours, surrounding the main settlement. The commander broadcast his demands in the clear, confident tones of a conqueror who had done this many times before. Surrender, submit, become part of the Dominion. The human colonial governor, a woman named Sarah, sent back a two-word response. The translation program struggled with the idiom, but the meaning was clear enough. No. The commander was not concerned. Sieges were simple mathematics. The colonists had limited food, limited water, limited ammunition. Time was on his side. Every day that passed weakened the humans and strengthened his position. He settled in to wait. 1 week passed, then 2, then a month. They began to notice strange things. The humans were not starving. They had started growing food inside their buildings under artificial lights. They had found ways to recycle their water, to stretch their supplies, to survive on less than any could imagine. When the siege began, the commander's calculations showed they had perhaps 60 days of food remaining. 90 days later, they showed no signs of hunger. The humans were also not surrendering. In experience, besieged populations grew desperate. They begged for terms, fought among themselves, collapsed into chaos. The humans did none of these things. They organized, they built, they waited. And they fought back. It started small. A patrol would go out and not return. A supply depot would explode in the night. A commander would be found dead in his quarters, killed silently, impossibly, with no sign of how the assassin had entered or escaped. The humans called these raids, quick strikes in darkness, hitting weak points, then vanishing before retaliation could come. They had never faced tactics like this. Their wars were fought in the open, army against army, strength against strength. This shadow war made no sense to them. The colonists had fewer than 2,000 trained soldiers. They had 50,000. By every rational measure, the humans should have been hiding, conserving their strength, hopping for rescue. Instead, they attacked. I learned the details later, from survivors and recordings and analysis by compact military experts. What she learned kept her awake at night. Humans were pursuit predators. Everyone knew that now. They were built for endurance, for patience, for the long chase, but that was not all they were. They were also ambush predators when they needed to be. The human soldiers would lie in wait for hours, motionless, barely breathing. They could slow their heart rates, control their body temperature, become almost invisible to sensors designed to detect living beings. Then, when their target passed, they would explode into violence. Fast, brutal, efficient. They evolved to fear things that chased them in swarms, overwhelming through numbers. They had no instincts for dealing with a single enemy that appeared from nowhere, killed in seconds, and vanished again. Within 3 months, soldiers were refusing night patrols. Within 4 months, their commanders had to execute deserters to maintain discipline. Within 5 months, more had died from stress and fear than from actual combat. The humans had a name for what they were doing. They called it psychological warfare. They were not just trying to kill, they were trying to break them. It worked. The commander sent increasingly desperate reports to his superiors. He requested reinforcements, new strategies, permission to use heavier weapons. The response was always the same: Hold your position. Victory is inevitable. The humans must break eventually. But the humans did not break. They bent sometimes. They bled often, but they never stopped fighting. 18 months after the siege began, a compact relief fleet finally arrived. It had taken time to organize, to navigate the politics, to assemble forces from dozens of species. A was on the lead ship, serving as an advisor. She expected to find ruins, desperate survivors clinging to the wreckage of their colony, horror stories that would be told for generations. Instead, she found something that redefined her understanding of humanity. The colony was battered but standing. The defense force had lost half its members, but the survivors were still fighting. The civilian population had suffered, but they had organized medical care, rationed supplies, maintained order. And in the camps outside the settlement, 17,000 prisoners waited in orderly rows. The humans had not just survived the siege, they had captured a third of the enemy army. A walked through the colony in a daze. She saw humans who had lost limbs continuing to work with mechanical replacements. She saw children who had grown up under siege, who knew nothing but war, playing games in the streets. She saw old men and women who should have died from the stress, still standing, still fighting, still refusing to give up. Sarah met her at the governor's office. The woman looked decades older than her actual age. She had lost weight, lost sleep, lost friends and family, but her eyes were bright and hard. "You came," said. "We came as quickly as we could," a replied. "The politics were difficult." Laughed, it was not a happy sound. "Politics? We've been fighting for 18 months and you had politics." "I know, I am sorry." Shook her head. "Don't be, we knew help might not come. We planned for that. We were ready to fight until there was no one left to fight." I believed her. That was the terrifying part. She absolutely believed her. "The thought they understood us," continued. "They thought we would calculate the odds and surrender when the numbers turned against us. They didn't understand that humans don't work that way." "How do humans work?" Smiled, it was not a pleasant expression. "We're stubborn, we're spiteful. We will burn our own house down before we let an enemy take it. We will fight and lose and fight again until winning or dying are the only options left. The wanted our colony. They could have had ashes. They could have had rubble. They could have had a graveyard. But they were never, ever going to have our surrender." A thought about the persistent hunters she had watched all those years ago. Walking across the savannah, never stopping, never tiring, following their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The had become the prey. Word of the siege spread across the galaxy. The Dominion tried to suppress the story, but information travels fast in a civilization of 1,000 worlds. Soon, everyone knew what had happened at 7. A new species, barely 3 years in the compact, had held off the Dominion for 18 months, not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers or powerful allies, through sheer, stubborn, irrational refusal to lose. The word for human, a learned, translated roughly as the patient death. It was not a compliment, it was an expression of fear. The galaxy had a new apex predator, and for the first time in thousands of years, the balance of power began to shift. 50 years had passed since the Whisper of Certainty first detected signals from a small blue planet. 50 years since I had watched footage of persistent hunters and felt true fear for the first time in her life. 50 years since humanity had stumbled onto the galactic stage and changed everything. I was old now, ancient by standards. Her antennae had faded from deep purple to pale silver. Her once quick movements had slowed to a careful shuffle. She spent most of her time in her quarters on the compact capital world, writing memoirs that few would read and advice that fewer would follow. But today was different. Today, she had been summoned to the Grand Assembly. The assembly chamber was vast, built to accommodate representatives from thousands of species. Gravity fields varied from section to section, allowing beings of all sizes and metabolisms to participate. Translator devices hummed constantly, turning 1,000 languages into comprehensible speech. Light filters adjusted for eyes that saw in every spectrum from infrared to ultraviolet. A took her place in the delegation, accepting the concerned glances of her younger colleagues. She should not have made the journey. Her doctors had been very clear about that. But some things were more important than a few extra years of life. The topic of today's assembly was one she had been waiting decades to witness: humanity's nomination to the Security Council. The Council was the true power in the compact, a group of 12 species, the oldest and most influential civilizations in the galaxy. They had guided the compact since its founding, making decisions that affected trillions of lives. Membership was permanent and sacred. No species had been added in 40,000 years. Until now. The speaker, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell, called the assembly to order. The vast chamber fell silent. "We gather to consider an unprecedented matter," the speaker announced. "The nomination of a new species to permanent membership on the Security Council. The species in question is humanity, sponsored by the delegation." I felt the weight of countless eyes turning toward her. She had submitted the nomination herself. It had been her life's work in many ways. "The floor is open for debate." The first speaker was a massive creature of metal and organic tissue, old even by the standards of ancient species. His voice resonated through the chamber like thunder. "I oppose this nomination in the strongest terms. Humanity is a species of barely controlled violence. They have been part of the compact for 50 years. 50 years. The youngest current council member has been civilized for 600,000 years. This proposal is an insult to everything the council represents." Murmurs of agreement rippled through many delegations. They were influential, and their objection carried weight. A delegate spoke next, her crystalline form chiming as she moved. "We do not dispute humanity's accomplishments. The incident demonstrated their capabilities, but capability and trustworthiness are not the same thing. Humans are unpredictable. They act on emotions we do not understand. They form attachments that defy logic. How can we give them power over the galaxy's future?" More agreement, more nodding heads and flashing communication signals. A dozen species rose to oppose the nomination. They cited humanity's violent history, the wars they had fought among themselves before achieving space flight, the weapons they had created, terrible things capable of destroying entire worlds, the speed with which they had spread across the galaxy, claiming territory, building fleets, growing stronger year by year. "They are too dangerous," they concluded, "too young, too aggressive. Perhaps in another 100,000 years, when they have proven themselves, we can reconsider, but not now, not yet." The opposition rested. The speaker turned to "The sponsor may respond." Arose slowly. Her joints ached. Her vision was not what it had been. But her mind was still sharp, and her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of decades of experience. "You are correct," she said. The assembly stirred in surprise. "Humanity is dangerous. They are aggressive, violent, unpredictable. Everything you have said is true." She paused, letting her words settle. "But you miss the point entirely." She activated her personal display, projecting images into the air above the assembly floor. Images she had collected over 50 years of studying humanity. "When I first encountered humans, I was afraid. They were predators. Real predators, the kind my species evolved to flee from. Their eyes faced forward. They smiled with their teeth. They had spent their evolutionary history chasing prey to death through sheer persistence." The images showed humans hunting, fighting, building, destroying. A history of violence stretching back millions of years. But I kept watching, I kept studying, and I saw something else. The images changed. A human carrying an injured child through a war zone. doctors working to save lives in a disaster area, a woman giving her food to a stranger, a man risking death to rescue an animal from a fire. Humans bond with things that could kill them. They keep wolves in their homes and call them pets. They love creatures that have no evolutionary purpose, simply because they want to. They form attachments that defy logic because they believe connection is more important than survival. She showed them humans crying at funerals for people they had never met, humans celebrating the achievements of strangers, humans sacrificing comfort and safety for abstract principles they called justice and fairness and hope. They have weapons that could crack worlds. This is true. But they have used those weapons only on themselves in wars they now consider the greatest shames of their history. They could have conquered. They could have dominated. They chose to build instead. A turn to face the delegation directly. You say they are too young, but age does not equal wisdom. They are older than most council members, and they are conquerors. They are ancient beyond measure, and they have never once offered aid to a younger species. Time teaches nothing if you refuse to learn. Her voice grew stronger. The old, who should have been resting in comfortable retirement, spoke with the force of absolute conviction. 50 years ago, I stood before a human diplomat for the first time. I expected a predator. I found something else. Something that defies easy categories. Yes, humans are killers, but they are also healers. They are destroyers and creators. They are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered and also the most compassionate. She showed them the aftermath of the incident. The prisoners of war, treated according to standards that most species would have found excessive. The relief efforts humans had organized for civilian populations affected by the war. The peace treaty they had negotiated, one that gave the Dominion terms far more generous than they deserved. They tried to conquer humanity. They failed. And when the war was over, the humans did not seek revenge. They did not demand reparations or territory or submission. They asked only for peace. And when the Dominion agreed, the humans helped them rebuild. The assembly was silent now. Even they had no immediate response. You fear what humans might do if they gain power over the compact, continued. This is reasonable. Power corrupts, as the old saying goes. But consider this. Humans have had power on their own world for thousands of years. They could have used that power to dominate their entire biosphere, to eliminate every other species, to reshape their planet entirely according to their whims. She showed them Earth, blue and green and beautiful, still teeming with life after all the centuries of human dominance. They chose not to. When they realized they were killing their world, they changed. Slowly, painfully, imperfectly. But they changed. They learned. They grew. This is what humans do. They make mistakes, terrible mistakes, and then they look at those mistakes and decide to be better. A turn to face the entire assembly. The galaxy has always been protected by the strongest. That is the way of things. The Council exists because powerful species agreed to use their power for the common good. But the galaxy has never been protected by apex predators, by beings who evolved to hunt, to pursue, to never give up until they achieve their goal. She smiled, showing her own teeth, an expression she had learned from her human friends. You ask if humanity can be trusted with power. I ask a different question. What species is better suited to guard the galaxy? What species is more capable of standing against threats that would make others flee? What species has proven, again and again, that they will fight and die for people they have never met, simply because it is the right thing to do? She let the question hang in the air. The wolves are offering to watch the sheep. You may refuse their offer, but ask yourselves, when the next great threat emerges, when the next conqueror rises, when the galaxy faces a danger that patience and diplomacy cannot solve, who do you want standing between civilization and destruction? A species that runs, or a species that never stops? A return to her seat. The chamber buzzed with discussion. translator devices working overtime to keep up with 1,000 simultaneous conversations. The vote took hours. Species debated among themselves, consulted with allies, weighed ancient prejudices against recent evidence. They argued fiercely against the nomination. They abstained, unwilling to commit either way. A dozen smaller species switched their positions multiple times. But in the end, the mathematics were clear. Humanity was admitted to the Security Council by a margin of 63%. The human delegation, which had sat quietly through the entire debate, rose to accept their new responsibility. Their leader, a woman who reminded us strongly of Sarah from the Seven Siege, approached the speaker's platform. "We accept this honor with gratitude and humility," she said. "We know we are young. We know we have much to learn. We know that many here today voted against us, and we respect their concerns." She paused, looking out over the vast assembly. "But we want you to know something. We will not let you down. Humanity has spent its entire existence fighting for survival, first against our planet, then against ourselves. We have learned, slowly and painfully, that the only fights worth winning are the ones that make things better for everyone." Her voice was steady, confident, utterly without aggression. "The galaxy is our home now, all of it. Every species, every world, every civilization. We will protect it as we would protect our own families, not because we want power or glory or dominion, but because protection is what apex predators are for." She smiled, and for just a moment I saw the hunter beneath the diplomat, the persistent predator who would chase any threat across the galaxy, never tiring, never stopping until it was defeated. "You have trusted us with your safety. We will not betray that trust. This is our promise. This is our pledge. This is what humans do." The assembly erupted in applause. Not universal, not unanimous, but real and substantial. The sound washed over like a wave. She was old. She was tired. She had given her entire career to this moment. And as she watched humanity take its place among the rulers of the galaxy, she felt something she had not felt since that first terrifying encounter 50 years ago. Peace. The apex predators had come to protect the sheep, and for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy's prey species could sleep without fear. The universe would never be the same. But perhaps a thought, it would finally be safe.